and welcome to another episode of The Focal Thought. My guest today is Jodi Wellman. How are you, Jodi?
Hey, I'm doing really well. How about you, Gordon?
Good, good. Thanks. And thanks again also for coming on the show. So, Jodi, you've got a Master of Applied Positive Psychology degree from the University of Pennsylvania, and you are a professional certified coach with the ICF, which I believe is the International Coaching Federation, and also a certified professional coactive coach from CTI, which is the Coactive Leadership Training and Life Coaching Certification Institute. And you've got a fantastic website called 4000mondays.com, which I'm definitely going to put in the show notes as well. And you've got many years of executive leadership experience with the corporate world. So it's great combining, all of these facets that you have into 4000mondays.com. And the concept here is, and I want to sort of bring this to a quote I had read a long time ago. I think it was about maybe 2011, 2012. And I just came across this, accidentally. It was from the one of the chapels, I think, at the Santa Maria della Concezione di Cappuccini. And there was a quote there on one of the stones that said, "What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be." And I'll just repeat that again. What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be. And, they were referring to the skeletons that were in the grave. This was sort of a memento mori. And it really hit me at that point because too often we get caught up in life. We get caught up in some of the distractions of life and sometimes also, the passions of life. And we never really think about the end of life. And that's something that's important because it's only when you do have that sort of revelation that you start realizing that, there's the hourglass with the sand that's, dwindling down. There's a timer, that's counting down backwards. And sometimes you never really know when that timer is going to stop. We hope it'll, last as long as possible. You really concentrated your work around all of this, right? So I first wanted to ask you, how did you start sort of thinking about this? Or when did the revelation, if at all, happen for you?
Well, thank you for asking. I've always been generally intrigued by the idea of the end. But I would say my mom passed away in her late 50s. And, obviously that was really sad and crappy. And what struck me, maybe upon reflection afterwards, more than anything, was not just her loss, but it was also, my perception that she died with a lot of regrets, of things that she didn't do. And in the work that I was doing, so I'm trying to think the work I was doing at the time when she passed away, and even beforehand, like your typical corporate leadership stuff. You don't come across too many people's stories around coulda, shoulda, woulda, but shifting into leadership coaching around 8 years ago, that really opened my eyes up to just like our human experience of the way in which we can choose to live that can get us to the end, either feeling really proud of the lives we've lived or like we've really given it a go and we've really engaged, versus that feeling that I think a lot of us are really afraid of. And I'm afraid of it too. That feeling of getting to the end with that sort of bitter taste of, oh man, I could have done it differently. I wished I had done X, Y, Z. And there are so many examples, right? So for me, it might have been, my mom's passing away was a big catalyst. And then just reading on the topic, being really, really passionate about the idea that, hey, this is intriguing. And I actually think that there's something to learn from the idea of memento mori. You said the word earlier, that Latin phrase that means that we should remember that we will die. I thought, well, this sounds juicy. There's something here. So then, of course, I just wanted to learn more and do more with it.
Got it. Okay. I like that you said that, you learned more, or at least at that point, from a passing, because too often, we rely on parents to teach us, while they're here with us. Then sometimes we also do learn very important lessons, when they pass. And those lessons are important because it can be life changing. It can really, alter the trajectory of where you're heading in life.
Yes. Yeah. I like that you're saying that. I spoke to a woman recently who was very profoundly affected by her father's passing, because his point was, I've lived a good life. Go live yours. And so it was kind of like the opposite of my mom's passing, about this guy, presumably didn't really have many deathbed regrets. And this woman was really affected to say, I want to be like that. I want to get to the end and feel like I did it. And so oftentimes the unfortunate experience of losing someone you love and who you care about can be that reflection point of, am I going to be like this? Good, bad, or otherwise? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So then what did you do at that point? How did you start to delve into this concept?
Yeah. So for a long time, I did absolutely nothing about it. I was collecting these little articles and scraps of paper in this journal that I still have to this day. It's this little gray leather-bound journal a friend of mine sent me. And if I'm being really honest, the more that I collected and the more that I read and the more that I got excited, the more scared that I got, because I didn't know how it could work into my life. So here I was working at the time, corporate job, no time for dinner, let alone like indulging in something that I thought, like, what do I do with this? Like, this is more than just a hobby. Like, how do I make this work in my life? And so then it became actually a little bit of a taboo topic. I don't know if you've ever had that, where it's something that's just so fascinating to you that it's like, I don't know how to integrate it. And so therefore it intimidates me.
Yes.
That was my case for a while. And then shifting into coaching, it felt like, well, there's a little more space for this now. It's about helping people, initially for leadership, perform better as leaders, like their lives more. And then for non-leaders, how do I live a life worth living? I thought, well, there's some room for this, but I was still afraid to go there because, like, let's be honest, death is a pretty big taboo topic. And I enrolled in the positive psychology master's program you alluded to in your intro. And even then I was afraid to talk about it, because I actually, in my application for the program, I debated endlessly. I said, do I say I want to apply this in the corporate world, or do I say that I want to talk more about figuring out how to use death as a motivator? And I thought, well, don't do that. They're not going to admit you. And so, I didn't talk about it, but what I did do is I did give myself permission to study it for my thesis. And that was when the doors just blew wide open on all of this for me, where I realized, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's research already on this. And in fact, an overwhelmingly wonderful amount of it. I was just even reading new journal studies this morning because that's what I love to do. And it gave me this sort of sense of validity, and it sparked my passion to the point where it set it on fire in a great way. And so I did end up adjusting my path by, changing the work I do to start 4,000 Mondays. By the way, 4,000, the deal with that is that we roughly get 4,000 weeks to live. So there you go. And you know what? I'm not scared anymore. I've studied it. I know enough about it. I'm overly excited about it. Let me just make something of this and help people with it. And really, I'm just helping people live. PS through the, idea of not dying empty. But that's kind of my journey in terms of how I took it to the next level.
Correct. Yeah. And if you really want to put the pressure, instead of 4,000 weekends, you can think of how many summers you might have left, and really not a lot.
That is, thank you for saying that, because I just met someone the other day who had a really neat take on it too, about, he's a parent, and his point was, you have 18 summers with your kid. And I loved that. I mean, like, that's gripping, right? The idea of the temporality of the experiences in our lives. Does that help us to really take them more serious? I mean, of course I say yes. I wouldn't have built a business on it if I didn't think so. But you're right, that how many summers, how many big trips do you have left to Europe? Because most of us don't do that every year. I think we're on the same idea.
Oh, no, that's good. And I really like what you're doing with this, because you've really sort of, put a fence around it. You've put a constraint, almost a limitation on time, so that you can achieve the maximum potential. Because too often I mean, I'm the same way. I think that, uh, earth, life, energy, it's abundant and infinite, but, our life on earth, in this sort of body and in this, present consciousness that we have, is limited. So, we're sort of intrigued, or, it's a romantic effect that, you've got this infinite, sort of life ahead of you, but really it's not. In the grand scheme of things, it's just a small microsecond, if, less than that in the timeline of the universe. And you've got this interesting blog on, how I think you call it How Prison Can Free You Up to Live. And that really shows that if you're sort of encased in this limited position, that you can really use that to maximize and become unlimited, right? Just sort of put yourself forcibly into that setting.
Yeah. Whether it's any kind of metaphor will do, imagining that, yes, you are lacking freedom, you are in prison, or you are, maybe even the constraints of the role you're in. Maybe your job right now is taking up an overly enormous part of your life, and it's crowding out your experience of feeling really alive in other ways. Or maybe it is that idea that, wow, I maybe only have, 13 more summers with my kid. Or for me, I may only have 1,984 weeks left, or, Friday nights or whatever. Not that Friday nights are a big deal for me anymore, but does that do this thing that in, the world of psychology and science, it's called temporal scarcity. And it's this idea that, when you have a resource and it becomes more scarce, it typically increases in its perceived value. So if we frame an event, like even a vacation, I don't know, I haven't taken a vacation in like 2 years now. I don't know about you, if you've taken one yet post-COVID. But, you've got 10 days and you realize you're whiling your time away, and then all of a sudden it's Thursday night and you're like, oh my gosh, the plane leaves on Sunday morning. Like, I really got to savor this. All of a sudden, your beach trip is way more salient and valuable to you. And that does work. So, studies show that this idea about reminding ourselves of our death really does translate into this sort of immediate, not only a reminder of life, because this is not about being morbid. I've got skulls everywhere, but it's not about focusing on death. There's a means to that end, it's so that it can help spark us to live. But by focusing on that limiting time, that is the thing that can help us to see, life as this valuable asset that is worth preserving. And that's been my experience in working with people with it, in addition to reading studies about it.
Sure. And, like you're saying, you're not really tolling the bell of death to, incite fear, but it's there as a motivator. You're just leveraging off death to maximize life. And I wanted to ask you, with work that you do with your clients and in your research, what are your thoughts on, like you mentioned, once we realize life is a scarce resource, that's really when we begin to maximize it. Because, with some of the entrepreneurs I've met, or people who are very productive, they're either doing it from a driving force of passion, or they're doing it from a driving force of knowing that the grains of sand are running out, and they've really got, barely enough time to get stuff done. We look at someone like, say, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, who, one company is not enough. They're multiple companies, they're pushing the limits. So for them to enter this mindset of knowing that, their time is a limited resource, is this something that just happens randomly, or is it something that's a development thing where we have to sort of get into, or how does it occur for some people and not occur for some others?
That's a neat question. I think that some people are wired to have a scarcity mindset versus an abundant one. And I think you started touching on it earlier. And I want to be clear that, I'm talking about temporal scarcity, and I'm talking about really focusing on the fact that, the grains of sand are dripping into the bottom of the hourglass, or the time is ticking, and it's, I try and be goofy about it, but the undertone is like, no, seriously, time is ticking.
Yeah.
And yet, if we go too far with that, to that scarcity mindset of there will never be enough. Ouch. Like I wouldn't want that to be a message that someone would interpret from all this work, right? It's like, so some people will approach life with there isn't enough, there will never be enough time, enough opportunity, enough money, enough of all the things I long for. And I would contend, so some people are already wired to go, wow, my end is in sight. And, my only hope is that they can still find ways to add vitality and meaning and joy and things in their life, even if they do feel like it's fleeting. What I do notice for a majority of the population, so other than those who are just really scarcity focused, is that we take life for granted. We slip into autopilot in a hurry. And we do this because we are so efficiently designed as humans to get work done, to protect ourselves, and to create routines that make things easier. And they can be serving until they're not, until we find that all of a sudden we don't really know the difference between, like, it's July 27th right now, right? Like, how did that happen? All of a sudden that's a blur. Like, I thought it was just June and June was just May. And so most of us do need to consciously stop and pause and do this reflection. And this is a reflection, this memento mori idea, just every now and then stopping and realizing, oh, right, like I don't have forever. They've been doing this for centuries. This has been going on in art from way back days of old. There are these reminders of death, little ornaments that people would keep close to remind them, art on the walls, or clearly a lot of religions have built this concept into the work that they do. Yeah. So as humans, we have mechanisms that if we really wake up to them and choose to use them, they are there. And we do need to do this because it is our tendency to just kind of gloss into the what I call like this sort of functioning zombie zone. And so we do need to stop, pause, look at it, use it as a very sufficient, oh, right, wow, maybe I should start that business because I'm not getting any younger. And this really matters to me. And this might really make me feel really, really excited and fulfilled and proud. And if I didn't do it, would I get to the end? And would I have that feeling, that pang of regret that I didn't do it? So that's what we're talking about. And I do think because we're mostly wired to just let time slip by, it behooves us to stop and think.
Got it. And like you also mentioned earlier, death is a taboo subject. We really don't speak about it. I mean, some cultures, in fact, even celebrate, like they've got the Day of the Dead and things like that. But it's not mainstream to talk about it as much. And, you mentioned being in autopilot mode, being in zombie mode. So, and, you've got this wonderful picture on your website of a switch, and the top part of the switch, it says alive, and the bottom part says autopilot. So, assuming someone gets into this frame of mind where, okay, I've got limited time, let's be productive. So they turn on the switch from autopilot, they become alive. Yeah. Now, one of the central facets of that is to find your purpose. And I think, Picasso said it very well, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. So with the work that you, again, do with your clients and from what you've seen, how would you get someone to find their purpose? And also, more importantly, sometimes I think that people have a purpose that is sort of maybe given to them or they're familiar with. So, we've seen cases where people who are movie stars, their children have become movie stars, or if they're sports athletes, their children have become sport athletes. So, even with musicians. So sometimes I think they've gotten their purpose from their immediate family, but how wonderful it might be to find your purpose that is unique and, that you found out from your own curiosity rather than, it was bestowed upon you or you sort of had a heads up with that. So how would you recommend someone start to find their purpose?
Yeah, for many people, it's like this lifelong pursuit. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do that. And I think a little pressure is good and important, especially if the way you described it, you've inherited a purpose, or one has been forced upon you. I work with a lot of people that have experienced that, right? That Well, I went to law school because that was what, I was supposed to do. Um,
And
and
sometimes that's okay, because sometimes you can take what's given and make it better, right? So
yeah, I think you're really right. And there are people that can have multiple purposes. I'm feeling the need to call it purpie, even though I know that's not how you pluralize purposes, but you can have that where for some people, like a career is not that big of a deal in their identity and how it defines them. And so, okay, I can be a lawyer in the day, or I can be a veterinarian assistant in the day. And my real passion comes alive in my non-work hours where I help kids learn how to read, or I help look after my aging parent, or whatever that might be for you. And so you can have it, doesn't need to be a career, just want to be clear. It's way better when it can also be part of your career, but not necessary.
yeah.
Finding passion is, passion, I guess that was a Freudian slip. Finding purpose, is often about pausing long enough to just stop and listen and be like, what is the stuff that lights me up? What is the stuff that gives me a meaning? And what is it that, if I really stop and tune into what my values are, like the top 10 things, and if I put them in order, the values that I hold dear, to what extent am I honoring them? And what would it take for me to honor them? And when you start sniffing around that, and that's really like the basis of some early coaching sessions, it's like, what is the stuff that makes you feel most alive and most like yourself, that's effortless, that's energizing, all the things that make you you? Sometimes it just emerges and it becomes sort of clear that, wow, like I come alive, and I feel like I want to solve problems that no one else wants to solve. That can be someone's purpose. Another woman I worked with recently became aware after working together that she just wanted to be the person that lit people up, that made them smile when she came across them, so that when they left a conversation with her, or passing her something to photocopy at the office, or whatever it was, that she just made them feel brighter and smile. Because connection and happiness and positivity was just, those were her values that were just off the charts for her. So a lot of the times it takes a little bit of like an excavation to figure out what matters to you, why, what would you do in life if money and time were not a concern, you had all the resources in the world. What's the thing that if you couldn't do it again, it would feel like your heart was broken? What's the thing that makes you really feel fulfilled? What's the thing that you lose yourself in? The concept of flow. What makes you feel like you're in the zone and you lose track of time? All those really juicy subjects are big clues that get you towards what is my purpose in life. And I have to say one more thing about it. It's like the pressure. I think many of us feel like a purpose needs to be magnanimous and somehow life-changing for other people, like world-changing. And it can be just beautifully simple. Like ideally, there's no judgment around it from anyone, because it's just you. No one else needs to know. I have a lot of clients, their purpose in life is to be just a really good parent, perfectly imperfect. I want to raise a really great human being. That's my purpose. Oh yeah, and on the side, I have a bunch of other roles, but my real purpose right now is this. And I think your purpose can change over time. And that does contribute right into the way in which we want to live our lives. Like I look at life in a couple different dimensions, where ideally, to avoid the dead zone, which is where we do feel like our life lacks meaning and vitality, I think we can make our lives deeper with meaning. And one of the ways to do that is to get in touch with a little bit of your purpose and just do what you can to, in some way, live that life, not the life that others have expected of you, which Bronnie Ware is an author. She's a palliative care nurse, or she used to be, and she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the number one regret was that people said, I wished I'd had the courage to live a life that was true to me, not the life that others expected of me. It's the number one regret people had on their hospice deathbeds. So I think purpose and finding that kind of living purpose fully is one of the ways that can help us get to the end and feel fantastic.
No, that's very well put. And I'm glad you sort of also mentioned that, it doesn't have to be glamorous. You don't have to be a rock star. It could be something that's very simple and very pure. And, no one has to notice it. No one has to congratulate you for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think people get entangled with finding their purpose. Sometimes it could be right in front of you. But like you're saying, if you are curious, you take time to reflect, you'll notice that which you didn't think is your purpose is your purpose. And sometimes you have to be comfortable knowing that your purpose might not include, money, which is very important.
What a great point. Yeah. And sometimes your values can be incompatible. You might value financial security and safety, but you also really might value creativity. And not to say that those are incompatible at all. So I'm going to choose a different example, not to feed that myth. Like for what we talked about earlier about I avoided this interest of mine in this topic of memento mori in 4,000 Mondays because I didn't know how to make it happen and it scared me. And I didn't want to rock the boat of my big corporate job and how I identified with that. And I knew I wasn't living my purpose beforehand. Life was good. A lot of times it was really great. And I also knew that I had that gray leather-bound journal that I wanted to crack open and make something of, because that was what really made me feel like I had a heartbeat. And so sometimes, we forego it because it's going to rock the boat in a way that we don't want to get seasick.
Yeah, no, and sometimes you really have to rock the boat, and it's hard to rock the boat because, I was listening to Andrew Huberman the other day, who's from Stanford, and he was mentioning how there is some, neuroscience, some, sort of biological process to attachment and the herd mentality. So much so that, you're willing to change your response, your answers, your beliefs, just to, be part of the crowd, part of the clique. And, even though it's biological, I think you should try your very best just to break away from those biological processes, because you'll never be able to find, the real you. And I always tend to think that, our brain is, they say that the cave person brain from way back in the day, it's hardwired for negativity. Leveraging off stress, because we were in survival mode back then. But every day I try to sort of change that and say, why can't we at this point, hardwire for positivity, right? Leverage off that. But I guess there's certain principles, for flight and survival aspect. We need to sort of have cortisol and be in a stress mode, default setting, just to be ready in case anything happens, because if you're in bliss, you might not care if there's danger in front of you, right?
Yeah, good point. And it makes me wonder, in 1,500 years, if humans are still kicking, will we have slightly put a dent in that instinct to be on alert for danger and that negativity bias? Will things be different then? I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, or at least, like to have a switch, to be able to, once you're aware of it, then to be able to switch between both modes rather than be a victim of one of the modes, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think you're super right. And that's where, for those of us seeking some kind of enlightenment and or self-actualization and or insert phrase here, can we do that? Can we help manage our experience of being alive? Often. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so once we realized our time is a limited or scarce resource, we begin to find our purpose. Now we enact on our purpose, we share it with the world. And then I guess the beauty of that is, even if you knew you were going to pass tomorrow, if your time is limited, it wouldn't bother you as much, because you've got that fulfillment feeling, and that you've achieved your purpose, you've empowered and helped other people. So even if life cuts you short, you're happy about it, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The sense of fulfillment. I'm thinking of a study, or studies plural, that were done around elderly people, kind of closer to the end, and people who there was a bit of a question on, like, if I could do it over again, what would I do? And it brought up, a bunch of different things, paths they would have taken, and the sense of fulfillment there was like a direct correlation to purpose and having an experience in life, like going out there and just going forward and doing it, rather than those that felt an extra sense of anxiety at the end because they had that feeling of like a life left unlived. And I always found that phrase to be sad, like, and that again is, that harks back to my mom and what maybe motivated me to do all this, but that life left unlived, like, we can never do it all. Like, we got to be realistic. Like, most of us do have to work, and we, do have to go grocery shopping, and, can't all get to all the countries and do everything. But we can do a lot. We can do this life justice.
Yeah. And, like you're saying, it's the life unlived is, I think, one of the worst things that can happen to you. So, be productive, put your work out there. Don't worry about, followers or anything. I've always said that one person listens to you and you've changed the trajectory of life of that one person. That's really all you need, because they'll have the effect on someone else, and, that'll pass on as well. Right. And it's really nice to hear, because with your mom passing, that actually had that effect on you. So that was almost, indirectly her purpose towards you. And it worked, right? I mean,
yeah, that's a funny way of putting it. I like that. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks again for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. And if people want to find you, I'll put up in the show notes your website, right?
Absolutely. 4,000 Mondays it is. And then, there's a resource page where you can calculate your number of Mondays left. And thank you for having me here. I love the conversation, and your questions are great. So thank you.
No, that's great. And I wish you well and good luck.
Thank you.